Hello, and welcome to this informational video on the Reading Difficulty Risk Screener, California Education Code 53008. This presentation has been created by Decoding Dyslexia California, also known as DDCA. In this video, we will discuss the background of California's universal screening legislation, the purpose of screening, what the new law requires, the history of DDCA's literacy policy success, and resources. As we begin to discuss the background of California's universal screening legislation, we want to share a passage from the bill. By screening all pupils for risk of reading difficulties early, California can help families and teachers achieve the best learning and life outcomes for all pupils and close academic achievement gaps. Prior to July 2023, California was one of only a few states that did not mandate screening for risk of reading difficulties, including dyslexia. Originally known as Senate Bill 691, the new screening law became part of Senate Bill 114, TK-12 Education Omnibus Trailer Bill, and was signed into law on July 10, 2023. As part of the new law, a timeline was established to streamline various tasks. The first task was for the State Board of Education to develop evaluation criteria and appoint a panel of independent experts. They met this deadline on January 18, 2024. The second task was for the independent expert panel to approve a list of selected screening instruments. They also met this deadline and did so on December 16, 2024. We are currently on the third task, which is for local education agencies, also known as LEAs, to formally adopt one or more screeners from the approved list. They have until June 30th of this year to do so, and must do so at a public meeting. The last task is for LEAs to begin annual kindergarten through second grade screening with results shared with parents and guardians no later than 45 days from the date of screening. And they must begin the screening in the 25-26 school year. A little more information on the independent expert panel. On January 18, 2024, the State Board of Education unanimously approved a 9-person independent expert panel to develop evaluation criteria and subsequently create an approved list of universal screening instruments for risk of reading difficulties, including dyslexia. The experts selected for this reading difficulties risk screener selection panel met monthly and open to the public meetings and will serve a 2-year term. For more information on the panel, including its expert members, as well as access to all recorded meetings and meeting notes, please go to the web address listed or scan the QR code. The purpose of screening. It is important to note that screening does not diagnose children as having dyslexia, and it does not determine special education eligibility. Screening identifies children who are at risk for developing reading difficulties. It provides information about which children are likely to encounter difficulty learning to read and need targeted support. The goal is to reduce the prevalence of reading impairments, including dyslexia, by taking preventative actions and providing evidence-based interventions in response to screening, delivered in the general education classroom. What the new law requires. Before we discuss the specifics of the new law, we want to share this flyer titled Reading Difficulties Risk Screener, Implementation Steps for Schools and Districts. This flyer contains the important details of the new legislation, including links to various more in-depth resources. You can access this flyer by scanning the QR code. Details of the new law. Schools and districts, often called local education agencies or LEAs, will have until no later than the 25-26 academic year to begin annual screening of all students in kindergarten, grade 1, and grade 2. Parents and guardians will receive the results of the screening, including information on how to interpret the results and the proposed supports and services for children identified as at risk. Parents and guardians can opt out if they do not want their child screened. There are also provisions for alternate procedures for English learners who do not speak sufficient English to be screened using a home language screening instrument, if available. Support and/or services appropriate to the challenges identified in the screening process may include any of the following: evidence-based literacy instruction focused on the student's specific needs, progress monitoring, early intervention in the regular general education program, one-on-one or small group tutoring, further evaluation or diagnostic assessment. What the new law requires: adopt a screening instrument. The following 4 approved screening instruments were announced on December 16, 2024. Amira by Amira Learning for grades kindergarten through 2nd, available in English and Spanish. M-Class with Dibbles Edition 8 and M-Class Lectura by Amplify Education for grades kindergarten through 2nd, available in English and Spanish. Rapid Online Assessment of Reading, also known as ROAR, by Stanford University Brain Development and Education Lab for grades 1 and 2, available in English only. Multitudes by the University of California, San Francisco Dyslexia Center for grades kindergarten through 2nd, available in English and Spanish. What the new law requires: perform annual assessments. Annual assessment of students. Starting in the 25-26 school year, LEAs must annually assess students in kindergarten, grade 1, and grade 2 using the adopted screening instruments, unless parents opt out. Screening for newly enrolled students. If a student enrolls after screenings have been completed, the LEA must assess the student within 45 days of enrollment, unless the parent opts out or provides documentation of prior screening. What the law requires: notify parents. Parental notification and opt-out process. LEAs must inform parents of the screening, including the opt-out process, at least 15 calendar days before administering the screening. A student may be exempt from the requirements of this section with prior written consent of the parent or guardian if the student has a current identification or diagnosis of a reading difficulty, reading disorder, or other disability. If the student is eligible for special education or related services, or a plan pursuant to Section 504. Or if a student is in the process of being assessed for eligibility for special education and related services, or a plan pursuant to Section 504, and the student is being evaluated with diagnostic assessments that make screening pursuant to this section redundant. What the new law requires: use screening results. Provision of support for at-risk students. If a student is identified as being at risk of having reading difficulties after being screened, the LEA shall provide the student with supports and services appropriate to the specific challenges identified by the screening instrument, which may include, among other supports and services, any of the following as previously mentioned: evidence-based literacy instruction focused on the student's specific needs, progress monitoring, early intervention in the regular general education program, one-on-one or small group tutoring, further evaluation or diagnostic assessment. What the new law requires: share results with parents. Screening results will be shared with parents within 45 calendar days of assessment, along with guidance on next step. If a child is not fluent in English, they will be screened in their primary language if a screening instrument is available. There will be no impact on grades. These screenings do not affect report cards, special education status, or gifted programs. They are simply to identify students who need help early. Other considerations. A student must have sufficient English language knowledge and fluency to be able to be assessed using a screening instrument in English. Or if a screening instrument in their primary language becomes available, the LEA shall assess that student using the appropriate screening instrument. Results of an assessment shall not be used for any high stakes purpose, including but not limited to teacher or other staff evaluation or accountability, student grade promotion or retention, identification for gifted or talented education, reclassification of English learners, or identification as an individual with exceptional needs. You can find more information on the Reading Difficulties Risk Screener and the mandates of the law by scanning the QR codes on this page. Overview of DDCA's literacy policy success. The California Dyslexia Guidelines, Assembly Bill 1369, were approved in 2017 by the California Department of Education. Its purpose is to assist regular education teachers, special education teachers, and parents in identifying, assessing, and supporting students with dyslexia. Specifically, the California Dyslexia Guidelines added phonological processing to the processing deficits considered for specific learning disability eligibility. Many teachers in school districts were not identifying students with phonological deficits, leading them to struggle in the classroom. The information in the guidelines is not legally binding to school districts, but acts as an informational and advisory document on how to identify and educate students who are struggling in school because they can't read. New standards for teacher credentialing programs, Senate Bill 488. With this bill, teacher prep programs will face greater transparency and accountability for covering structured literacy and dyslexia in their coursework. The California Dyslexia Guidelines must be incorporated into pre-service teachers' coursework and, where applicable, supervised field experiences. Teacher candidates will learn about dyslexia, how to screen for risk of it, and how to teach using a structured literacy approach as defined in the California Dyslexia Guidelines. The new standards emphasize a preventative approach to addressing literacy screening, progress monitoring, and early intervention. Resources. Please scan the QR codes on this page to access additional resources that you may find helpful, including information on support groups and access to our You Asked library of important dyslexia-related questions and thorough, in-depth answers. Follow DDCA on social media and sign up for our emails by scanning the QR code below to stay up to date on literacy-related news, events, resources, and legislation. Thank you for watching, and we hope you found this information helpful.